Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Welcome to episode 208, I believe. 208? Yeah, okay. Not quite 2000. Maybe one day we'll get there. I'm Jack, here with Dave. Our guest on tonight's show is Dale Hanson. He is the author of Born Twice, Memoir of a Special Forces SOG Warrior. I read his book on my Kindle this week. I think you guys will really check it out. You can go find it on Amazon right now, as well as Dale's other books that he's written. Dale served in MACV-SOG, and not just on the reconnaissance teams, which we've talked to a few people about on this show before, but he also flew some of the bird dog reconnaissance operations in a small plane with a pilot. Exceedingly dangerous stuff. He worked in the intelligence, the S2 shop for MACV-SOG. And he also worked in Hatchet Force, which is sort of what we would call today the quick reaction force, the response force, if some guys got into trouble or there's a particularly big target to hit out there. So Dale did a number of things across MACV-SOG, including participating in some pretty hairy operations, to say the least. So Dale, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Dave, you want to give a quick shout out here?
Yeah, so real quick tonight, we'd like to thank ExpressVPN for supporting our show. ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that hackers can't steal your data. Secure your online data today at expressvpn.com/teamhouse and get 3 extra months free.
So, Dale, if you could start off, I'd like to ask you about your origin story. If you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing in rural, mostly Minnesota, as I recall, in the 1950s, and kind of talk us through that a little bit, and talk to us about how that sort of led you towards the military.
Right. I was born in 1947, so I was one of the war babies, and my dad actually enlisted just before Pearl Harbor, and wound up in all the battles. He was in Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal. He was in Tinian, a bunch of others, but he was in as an Army guy. You know, the Marines say they're the only ones, but these guys were attached, and he almost didn't get in the service. He was one of 7 brothers, all of whom went in the military, and 4 of them went to World War II, 2 of them in Korea. He almost didn't get in because they found out he was colorblind. And it turned out that that was an asset because he could see through camouflage. He could see, the colors didn't do anything. Blue and green, it meant nothing. So not only did they have the front lines and the outposts, and they had the second scouts, but he was the first scout. It was way, way, way behind enemy lines, and was a commander, and probably no one ever told him. But he was a crack shot and did the whole war and everything. Came home to a tiny little farm in Minnesota, met my mom. And for the first 4 years of my life, we never had water, electricity, sewer, any of those things. Single story house that he put together himself, and tar paper for on the walls, and 1x2 slats to keep the wind from blowing off the tar paper. And that's how we began. But the whole family were very highly patriotic. If your country was at war, you went to war. And I remember on this porch at my grandma's house, several of the uncles were there, and actually neighbors came by and everything. Everybody was in the war, and if you did not do your part, you were looked down horribly. So, what's the matter with you? That kind of thing. So I kind of grew up with this thing of patriotism. I became a Christian when I was 5, and actually walked the aisle and read the Bible many, many, many times. And I had Christian character, Christian principles, which ultimately made me anti-socialist and anti-communist as well. Socialism and communism were horrific. And there was an anecdote I picked up someplace, and I don't remember the source, but it was one of those turning points where you say, I have to get involved in this. I went to college to be a pastor. I was in my last year of college, and someone made a statistic: how many people in the world, living and dead, if you totaled them all up, heard the simple gospel story that the 12 disciples with this living and dead. If you told up every human being who heard the basic story, they figured 1 billion people had heard the basic gospel story. Well, in 1918, there was a big meeting of all the
Yeah, sorry guys, we're having some internet issues. Sorry, you're back, Dale.
Got it. Well, anyway, they said within the 50 years, how many people not only had heard the basic story of communism, but were actually turning to communism, reading Mao's Red Book and all the rest. And the actual answer was 2 billion people were studying communism. In other words, twice as many people in the last 50 years had turned communist as had turned Christian in 2,000 years. And so the movement, when people said that's not really a threat and it's something way overseas, I understood very clearly in my mind that that was definitely not the case, that communism would take over the world unless people did something. And I was a Christian. I was prepared to die. So sure. And so I put and enlisted, and I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the best that there is. I'm going to be a Green Beret. And I went through the whole deal. And actually, when I enlisted, I knew I would make the Green Berets. I don't want to talk forever, but mentally, I was up there. And physically, I was extremely strong. I had black belt. I spoke 2 languages. And I had my head on straight. I had my values and all that stuff, and so I was stable. And so I enlisted with the idea to go to Vietnam and fight. And if they
So
we froze in.
Yeah. We're just going to have to try to work through it, I suppose. Dale is in Alaska, so we're just having some hiccups. But
how did you know about the Green Beret? How did they become part of your awareness about the Army?
Yeah, I like everybody. I think it was Robin Moore's book, which I read, and the song, "The Ballad of the Green Berets," and the obvious idea out there is that they're the best that there were. If you were going to get to the top, that was the very, very best. And so I enlisted to try promoted there, and then I was on a undergraduate out of AIT, Advanced Infantry, and I was promoted out of there, and then to jump school. And out of our AIT, which was a secret place actually. Congress didn't know that camp existed. We had Fort Bragg and Fort Collins and everything else, but it was called Camp Crockett. And at max, it held a battalion of people 10 miles in the woods outside of Fort Gordon, Georgia. And they were all designed for commandos and airborne and things like that. And the cadre were very, very harsh. And other than the fact that the young ones, the E5s and 6s, were the graduates and honor graduates out of NCO school. And so they were assigned. Before I even got through jump school, every one of them were killed in the 173rd Airborne.
Oh, wow.
But and so they gave the test for Special Forces at Camp Crockett. 600 of us took the test, and only 3 of us passed. And so the 3 of us went as with the rest of the people. History, because the governor of Texas says my people aren't going to be pencil pushers, they're going to be the real thing. So he sent the entire Texas National Guard to jump school, and so we had the whole class along with them. And then went to Special Forces, did the selection and went over there. And I don't know if I should keep on going and give you some breaks.
So you were trained as a Special Forces intelligence sergeant. You got this additional specialty. What the next stop for you? I mean, pretty shortly afterwards was Vietnam, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
When we finished the phase one, and I think you have different words that cover that now, Robin Sage or whatever.
Sure.
We finished phase one, and MOS school, we only had 5 categories. You had demolition, weapons, communication, medics, and there was 11F, which was your operations and intel. You had to be an E7 with at least 5 years in Special Forces to take that. But they wanted people to go into SOG. And apparently our numbers were decimated and so forth. And 11F is actually the spirit of SOG, because it was intelligence gathering, spy networks, and things like that. We had a major that came before our group, and he said, we want some volunteers. He said that you have to have 130 IQ or more, and when you finish the school, you would be sent to a top secret project. And I recall him saying SOG, but other guys saying no, it was called something else. But he said 85% of us would be dead in 3 months. And so I had to think about that one, because I said, what number? Every 3 months, 85% die. And it winds up being about 4,000. So 1 out of 4,000 will last an entire tour. And when you're young and stupid and so forth, and forget the IQ, you figure you're going to survive, and you're indomitable and so forth. So we joined up, and I remember when I come back from my second or third tour in Khartoum, I was met by one of my friends, Mike Buckland, and he says, "You and I are the only ones left." That was it. And it was a fantastic school, an eye opener. We knew world events and how things were put together, and setting up spy networks, everything. Codes, fingerprinting with blood, everything you could think of out there.
Yeah, dead drops and invisible ink. Not things that people normally think that Special Forces soldiers do.
Yeah. But where we would have, even in an A camp, there'd be 12 guys, and you'd hire your own army, and you have to vet them as well. And sometimes you do it with fingerprints and coordinating and background checks and all the rest. So it was very important to do the intelligence and all those specific things. Or you capture a downed pilot or something. Is he really who you said he was?
So tell us about landing in Vietnam, getting in country, and how you're showing up in this, not an A camp even, but at CCC, and right. how that transpired.
Yeah. Well, we knew where we were going. When we finished school, the James Bond movies, they have M and Q and all the rest of them, Special Forces had the same thing. We had B. That was our counterpart to Q. That was Mr. Baker. He was the one who probably invented 90% of the things you've ever touched or used in Special Forces. The one who was a counterpart to Mrs. Moneypenny was Mrs. A, Mrs. Alexander, and she looked after us. And I would call her up and say, we finished our school. I said, we're waiting for our orders, and are you sure you want to go? And I said, yes, we are. and so she says, well, I'm working on it. And 2 days later, I called her up again. And then the third day, she recognized my voice. Oh, Dale, we got your orders. And we're on the plane. We lined up over in Cameron Bay, and then from there to Nha Trang. And I think we were kind of hands off. They knew we were going to SOG. And I remember the ones who went to CC North, CCN, that's SOG in the North Country, they were on one of the first planes, and then CC South, CCS, were gone. And so those of us in CCC in Central were still there for an extra day or two. And in walks this guy, His name is Dave Kirschbaum, and he was the real living SOG guy. And he came in there. He had a long mustache and all that stuff. Never talked. Strolled in there like he had been living in another planet. Just a man who kind of manifested in his character as someone who just really went through hard times, was barely getting through life and so forth. And we looked at him and saw that red patch on his shirt pocket that we would be wearing in a couple of days, and thought, man, that's the real deal, as someone who actually was been there and lived. And he was kind of the reality check. And we flew into Khartoum, and I signed into personnel. And I think I was the first one of our group. There was one slot left on the recon team, and S1 sent me over there where I met Bob Howard, and Bob Howard says, I know a team for you. And he introduced me to Norm Doney. And Doney was kind of a legend, and I really didn't know how much of a legend until after the service. But he had his silver stars. I think he had 9 bronze stars and so forth, but never talked about it. But just a seasoned man, not brain conscious and all this stuff. And he says, well, you call me by my first name, and why do you want to be on my team? What do you want from me in 6 months? And I says, I want your team, and he says, well, we'll work you through that. And we trained and did all the missions. And our specialty was prisoner snatches. And we were the one team that everybody wanted prisoners, but we were the one who trained for that in particular. My team were all mostly Chinese and a few Vietnamese and hardcore people.
We were talking a little bit before the show, and I'd just like to take a moment before moving on that some of my favorite parts of your book was actually the conversations about Howard and Doney. Bob Howard, of course, being a bona fide war hero, but in your book you get to see him not just as a legend, which he is, but you get to see him as a man, as a soldier, as a mentor. And the same with Doney. I really liked how you talk about how he sort of like mentored you and took you in almost as a son and showed you the ropes.
Yes. And both of them were that way. And interesting that Bob Howard never had a recon team or a company of his own. From the time he got there, he always wound up strap hanging to every dangerous area there was. And boy, if there was danger or a team in trouble, he says, I'm going. And he 3 times he should have had the Medal of Honor. And I read one of his affidavits where I thought, man, this must be the one where he got the Medal of Honor. And he got a bronze.
Yeah.
And at that time, Special Forces, we should have had, I think SOG had, I think it was 11 or 12 Medals of Honor. And my company in Khartoum had 5. We were the most decorated company in American history, and had triple what we did get. But the feeling out there, and I heard the people that weren't a part of SOG, who happened to visit the camp, they would say, well, that's what they do. It's nothing special. That's just what they do. And the other thing was, I remember General Singlab. I read one of his letters where he was chewing out the wards people that were in Saigon and so forth, that you weren't giving Special Forces people because they had earned too many medals, and you were going to wait for other units to keep up or catch up before you gave them any more. And Doney was one of those guys that he did his, as a matter of fact, he did his time in Delta, that Delta Project. Now you have Delta Force. The day I was there, his wife sent him a copy of Men's magazine. And I'd never seen the magazine before. But anyways, he just handed it to me. Said, hey, what do you think of that? The cover of Men's magazine had Doney's picture on it. And the caption was, Sergeant Doney, 6-man Mission Impossible team, drive out and slay 200 Vietnam. There's Doney, charming, good man.
Can you tell us about, being on Donnie's team and how you guys started training up. He started teaching you, and you guys got prepared for an in-country in South Vietnam mission. Supposed to be, maybe a bit of a confidence mission to make sure the team is squared away, but turned out to be a little bit more hairy than that, right?
Yeah, it was. We did a lot of local ones. We did an awful lot of training at the yard range. It's called where the practice, and we did IA drills, immediate action drills, over and over and over again. And I one of my big things is practicing magazine drill. Our setup was a little different than an awful lot of the SF guys. We used canteen covers. We had 3 of them on each side, and our back was always clear, so you'd never take off your gear in the field. And one canteen cover held 6 grenades. One of them carried radios and survival gear, and then the others carried magazines. I would put two flat on the bottom, and then the rest would be up. And I got to where I could change magazines in 2 seconds. And they say you can't do it that fast, but I could, because the Car 15 and the M16 were designed for right-handed people. I'm left-handed, and I never had to take it off my shoulder. But the release button for the magazine is on the left side, and I just hit that button while I'm reaching for the next magazine, and I slam it in with it. Well, the return is also on the left side. So the only time it took me was reaching for the magazine, and I could do it in 2. Did all the practicing and so forth, and then local missions, and then finally getting ready for this local mission, and of course Donnie had to caution me, because all of our missions over the fence, Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, were very, very hairy. And we could get overconfident, because Donnie would have to remind us that 50,000 Americans had been killed on training missions, what we call. The mission you're talking about was pretty close to where the siege of Ben Het was, and we were in there simply looking for the enemy who were besieging Ben Het, and that went for quite a while, Ben Het.
Dave, do you want to give a shout out here to our sponsor?
Yeah, real quick. First off, our first sponsor of the night is ExpressVPN, and honestly, this is the VPN that I personally use. I love them. It's super easy. But why do you need a VPN for your computer, for your phone? It's not just, like journalists, if you're in China, if you're a journalist trying to keep your location secret, like those are all great reasons. But every day people can use VPNs, because so many of the sites you go to could be breached. They could be compromised. But what a VPN does is it protects your identity as just a person on the internet. It doesn't allow you to broadcast your location and the data about your computer. Just fire up the app. It's one click, and I use it on my computer and my phone. One click and you're instantly protected. Go to expressvpn.com/teamhouse and find out how you can get 3 months free. Secure your online data today at expressvpn.com/teamhouse and get 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/teamhouse. And you should definitely use a VPN. I've been using ExpressVPN for a couple years now, and I love them.
The second sponsor for the show, I have to say up front, our disclaimer, our obligation to say this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Mm-hmm. So BetterHelp is a online service that you guys can go if you want to talk to a therapist. A lot of folks out there prefer to talk to somebody online rather than going directly in person. Look, we have this issue. Everyone knows about it amongst veterans, but also non-veterans. Sometimes people need to talk to somebody, and if talking to someone online helps you get over that initial hurdle before going into an office, or if you just want to keep it online, you can. And BetterHelp does that. So if you go and check out betterhelp.com/teamhouse, you'll get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/teamhouse to get 10% off your first month. So Dale, apologies for the interruption. Please continue. Tell us about your first mission with SOG.
Well, the most hairy ones that we had, but we were found out within hours of being on the ground, and they were on us with lots and lots of enemy people, and we kept evading, break contact, evade, and all this stuff, change directions, and so forth. Or trail or something, and we would sneak up on it and monitor the traffic and all that kind of a thing. I remember we were as a part of this. I think it was the first or second day. It was a longer mission, and you could hear the grass being like it was mowed. I don't know if it was a battalion, but it was very, very large units going through. And you can see where the footprints were, and the water was still running into the footprints.
Oh, wow.
And they were right there, right after us, and you put up take our pictures and all that kind of thing. But it was one of those things that was day after day. They were after us like that. And we would be in the RON, and you could hear them walking past you in the night, and you could hear them tapping and so forth. And in the morning, when you would wake up, you could hear them do the one gunshot, which meant they're telling the rest of the people we're awake. And then we would move, and then there would be a gunshot. And if we stopped, there would be a gunshot. And so we knew they were on us, but we still kept on our mission. And then finally, they were on us big time. They were the LZs covered, and we were sneaking place to place, changing our positions and stuff. And I would lay out my Claymore mines when we got close to an LZ, and with a timer on them to blow them. And it got to the place that I should say before, we made the first Donny ladders. Those ladders you see with three metal thing.
That you'd see them in lots of the pictures of MACV-SOG, the guys they'd snap into the ladders to get out, or climb them, hopefully,
Exactly.
but if not, snap into them.
Right. Well, we made the first ones in SOG, and we on my Saturday when I should have been doing something else, we made those, and then we showed the Colonel Lapp, the commander of the base, and all the other people. This is how we use them, because if you've ever climbed a rope when you're healthy, they're difficult. Mm-hmm. And on this one, it was like if you got wounded and got only part way up, you could just hit your snap link and they could roll you up. They knew where we were. And so we found a little clearing where it wasn't so bad, and got ready to blow whatever trees were in the area. And called Bob Howard, actually, who was head of recon then, and said, and there's no point in being secretive on the radio because they knew where we were at. So we said, called the radio people on and said, tell Bob we need what we talked about the other day. And it was the Vietnamese King Bee pilots who came for us. And if they think the Americans won't come, they will, because they want to put down the Americans here. But anyway, long and short, when they started coming, the enemy were just charging us full time, and we laid out all the explosives and all that. And then the King Bee pilots came. We blew the trees, and then in come the Donny ladders and stuff, and we got into that as quick as we could, start climbing, and Donny was only halfway up, and then I got up and I was trying to pull Donny in, and the King Bee pilots weren't used to having those ladders, so they started to take off before we cleared the trees, and I'm looking at the trees, just watching them grab the end of the Donny ladders, thinking they're going to either pull down the chopper or pull us, cut us off. And I watched it just finally break through, and we got out. And my Chinese, especially my point man, I was looking at him, and he always smiled. I don't know what the deal was, but he always smiled. And before this mission, it was interesting because they adopted me kind of in the Chinese did. It was really tough. And so they went to the witch doctor, and they got the name for Hanson, Hanson, the Han Dynasty, and son, and they came up with just the right words for Hanson, and they would write on my back in marker, so God could see it, and they would write in Chinese, Hanson, Kambaya Chin, which means never die. And so God's looking down, and he sees Dale Hanson down there. So, that's one of my guys.
I love the conversations they would have with you sometimes. So they say, Dale, you say Jesus #1. I think Buddha #1.
Yeah, that was the Chinese were coming after us, and I looked at him, and he had that Buddha. They always have it on the end of a chain, and when they think that we're about to die, they put that Buddha in their mouth, and if they die with Buddha in their mouth, they're gonna be all right. They'll go to wherever Buddhists go. And I looked at him, and he had that Buddha in his mouth. So that's when you know things are really getting tight.
What?
But coming back to it, just the Vietnamese tail gunner, that particular helicopter only has one door. You got the helicopter on that side, 6 feet deep of used rifle, the lift, what am I calling it?
The brass, like the brass?
The brass, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. The brass, and it's just thick on the ground, just bouncing all over like it's being... I think they used the 60, the 30. There's two kinds of machine guns, and they had the one with the what do you call it, the water filter that goes over it so that you can keep on shooting it.
Oh, it's a water cooled. That was probably a 30 cal. Yeah.
30 cal versus the 60. Yeah, thank you. The 30 cal, and boy, they were just shooting, and I thought, this thing is going to be burned, so you can see through the bullets, and we got home, and Vietnamese pilots, they have this unique deal is no matter how terrifying the mission was, they make it a point to think, oh, this is nothing, and they land that chopper down like a C-130 or something, and they land down there, and they try to be the first one out, and they get their Salem cigarette in their mouth and affect, this was nothing. It was everything.
It's interesting because we've had guys on from SOG before and talked to Roger Lockshear, as an American crew member, and talking about the hesitancy of some of the American pilots going into these situations. But the Vietnamese, the King Bees, the Vietnamese pilots, they were always kind of like game on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, they love that helicopter. And it was like they are that way on that helicopter. They're just fantastic, and if they have any chance whatsoever to make the rest of us look bad, they will be in there. You guarantee it.
Dale, you just said this was your very first combat mission, and you are thrust into like the main action sequence of any modern day movie, right? Military movie. What What were you thinking at that time? Were you just acting? Were you, were you processing, or did it take until after the mission when you realized what you had just been through?
Yeah, yeah. The adrenaline is there the whole time. You just our missions were a 7 to 10 day mission, and the adrenaline is the flight or that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And you go on a mission, and it would be so tense for all that time that your body wouldn't use food. You wouldn't have to go to the bathroom for the whole time because all the adrenaline and everything is going flight to fight.
Yeah.
And it was going to the out. It wasn't going to the inside. It was going to the outside, ready to fight. You come back, and it was like, it was like the most exciting thing you've ever seen in your life. It seems like when I get the first warning that you're going to go out, and I feel that electricity going into me. It's like the dread, and it's something really bad. Business.
Yeah.
And you just go. And I've had people that tell me, many of the white guys, I'm in Alaska, white guys, some of the guys would say, Dale, you're the most calm of anyone I've ever seen. It's like, man, you don't see my heart.
Yeah.
I'm scared. But I guess when the time is out there, people ask me very, very often, what is the number one thing that marks a special forces guy? And you think about it, intelligence and bravery and all that stuff. Being able to make a sound decision under fear. If you can make that sound decision when you're just tense, that's the number one thing you got to do. And when we do that out in the field and so forth, and then you come back out and you say, I did it and I lived. And I only got one more year to go.
And then when you get back, you go with Sergeant Doney with S2 to do debriefing and intel debriefing. Right. And in your book, there's this great part where you sit down and Doney, seasoned professional. Well, we walk 100 meters into the jungle. We cross a small stream, pebble beds on the bottom, a little steep on the west side. Cross the stream. There's a wash on the far. Like he remembers every little detail and recites it like like a seasoned veteran.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I wound up working when I got wounded. One time, I was working in intelligence and I was doing the debriefing. But when I'm here, I'm being debriefed. And you come in and you think, well, what are the things they're going to ask you? And you think this has been so tense, and they want to debrief you as quick as they can, while it's still useful. And they'll say, what was their hair like? Did they have haircuts? Did they have long hairs? Was their uniform clean? And all stuff. And I think, man, they've been shooting at me, and I'm shooting back. The last thing I think about is, did they have a haircut? But nonetheless, that's what you are asked. And it's also the thing that, that's why you have 11F. Those are the things that are so vital as they're making strategic decisions and so forth. And that's what you went overseas for in the first place.
So you've completed your first mission. Do you want to tell us about getting spooled up for your first trip across the fence into Laos?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones was when we were, Ben Het was big time under siege. And it was Norm Doney and I and one other American. I guess I should even back up a tiny bit first.
Sure.
When you're fighting a war big time, like in Vietnam and so forth, when you're fighting the communists, and we have much more the only way that they can continue on the war is to do guerrilla warfare and so forth. What Americans want to do more than anything else is we want them to get them all together so that we have many, many people so that we can wipe them out. And of course, some of the things like the French at Dien Bien Phu, the number one thing was that you want them to attack Dien Bien Phu so you can wipe out the enemy rather than do small things. Well, the communists were doing the guerrilla warfare to the point where they could go on for year and year, and they could be on us, wearing us out over and over and over again. So they had Quezon was the next big one that finally the communists thought, we have enough people that we can beat the Americans and people that will want to surrender and things like that. So they had the war there. They wiped out a couple American A camps and so forth, and they had the war there. Well, ultimately, we won. And so they thought, well, we're going to do it again. And they were still attacking Special Forces A camps, only 12 Americans, Green Berets, and our people. I thought, well, maybe we can get a victory there. Well, we kept staying out. Well, the next one was Ben Het, and that was number 3 in the big attacks. So they had the French, and that one. So now they wanted the big battle. And so they had it surrounded. They had thousands upon thousands of people. And it was an imperative that they win this war. And they had thousands and thousands, 40, 50,000, numerous divisions of communists surrounding, looking for the enemy, trying to find out where they were coming in, where the artillery and everything was coming from, and so forth. So that was the mission on that one big mission. So we were behind lines, and we were found out almost right away, within an hour, and we were changing direction and the whole thing, trying to stay alive and all that. And they were after us pretty much big time. Well, we were changing direction one time, and we were evading. And as we were changing direction, we were trying to get out to a certain area. I was looking down on the ground, and I thought there was a long black snake. And I thought, man, that's a big, long snake. And I looked at that thing, and I said, that's not a snake. And I got closer, and I looked at the thing. That's not a snake. That's a wire, a big listening device, and so forth. So I clicked my finger down. And he stopped, and he looked at me, and I motioned as he come, and I looked, and here was this big black listening device, and it was kind of on the edge of a train and stuff, and that was the sign of at least a battalion of enemy, at least a battalion. And I said, they're close. We are really close to where they're all up there. And I started listening, and all of a sudden I could hear in the very far distance, I heard the boom, boom, boom. And I said, I hear them firing. They got to be shooting from there at Ben Het. And so we circled up in an area. Donnie and I and my Chinese guy, who's dressed like a Chinese Russian actually, and so Norm and I and we crawled on our bellies, went across the road and everything, and worked our way over, and we found where the artillery was, and I could see the trees were moving and all this stuff, and finally I could see the artillery and the trucks and stuff were coming out there, and I could see and hear the artillery just boom, boom, and they were firing on Ben Het big time. And so I said, that's the spot, and so Norm and I were looking, we thought, well, there's a place, a curve in the river there, and there's a cliff there and all that stuff, and we got together and we said, this is the spot, this is exactly on the map. They said, yeah. So we worked our way back, and we did a contact to the communications, and we said that we found the enemy that are hitting Ben Het, and the plane came and all that kind of a thing. And so what the word that came to us was get to the very quickest LZ as fast as you can for an immediate extraction. And so as fast as we could go with the enemy chase, they sent in an emergency plane to pick us up. Now, I didn't realize it, but they had a whole company of a Mike Force that was doing the same thing we were, but a couple miles away. And the word came to them because they can't pick up all at once that many people. But anyway, they said, get as fast as you can, 7 clicks south, 3.5 miles south, as fast as you can go. And they sent them south, virtually on a run. And they picked us up, and at the end of this thing, by the time we got to Khartoum, they said a massive B-52 strike hit the spot that we found. And the word that came afterward was 100. I was talking to one of my friends that was in the company that got as far away as they could. And I says, what was it like to have the artillery, the 500-pound and 1,000-pound bombs hit the area? And he said they couldn't stand up. It was just immense. But anyway, we got to Khartoum, and the bombs hit, and that was the end of the siege of Ben Het. They bombed the entire place. It destroyed virtually all the enemy, and that was the very thing that ended the bombing and the siege at Ben Het. So it was interesting. It was a kind of a routine mission in some ways, but the ultimate thing of it was it ended the siege that was destroying the people. And they were close because the communists had made tunnels underneath all of the areas, and they were just ready to have all the people burst out of the ground in the center of the site.
It was a very effective use of reconnaissance and prevented it, another Lang Vey.
Yes.
And next for you, was the next thing for you in your trip through Vietnam, was it 1-0 school?
I think we had one more. Yeah, 1-0 school was one of the next. And it seems like every single thing we wound up with was something really interesting. 1-0 school was, of course, I was already kind of trained to be the 1-0, but they always sent us that anyway. It's a 3-week thing, and I'm there. And at the end of it all, they have a mission, a 5-day mission for us to go. And the mission, and it's all Green Berets on this team. And so they sent us they had an area of the country that was their specific thing, but it's so secret that the major that was in charge of the thing wouldn't take the place, and we were out in a safe area, and he said that he believed that there were moles out there who were explaining everything and kind of ruining what we were doing. But he says what is happening is there was a deal with the site for the rubber plantations and all that kind of a thing. And he says I think it's Goodyear. Goodyear had a deal with the North Vietnamese.
Michigan.
Yeah. And he said we have this site. They're making a deal with the Viet Cong and the communists that in exchange for not bombing our site, we won't bomb your site. But the Australians wanted to find them and come into contact. So we went in on that one, and the 5 of us, we worked our way right into the center of the rubber plantation. Lined up, and so and it was interesting because I was leading that one, and I got so close. It was really thick, and I got so close that I smelled the hidden North Vietnamese that were hidden there. I got so close I could smell his breath. And I just knew there was something going on there. And I stopped the people and stuff, and I didn't move. And then pretty soon he moved, and I could finally see it. Smell his breath, and I found him. So we had to back up, and we backed out of our cover and so forth, and worked our way out, and then finally found our way out, and we reported the enemy and all that kind of a thing, and then we called for to be picked up, and then the communists actually overwhelmed us. That going to lose any helicopters, so they said they wouldn't pick us up unless we went all the way around the opening to make sure there were no enemy in the area. Well, anyway, when I got to the place, it was shaped like I thought the only way we could make sure there were no enemy in the area was it was big enough that if we went all the way around, by that time they would have been in already. So I went to the narrow part, and I guarded that spot, figuring I could watch both sides and wait for the pickup. Saw where I was, and they saw that narrow spot. There was an opening area, a danger area. So they decided to cross the narrow spot right on top of us. And so we ducked in as low as we could. We buried in as deep as we could and ready to shoot. And in the meantime, they went right over the top of us. And they went over the top of us and worked their way out. And then finally, they got us out. We got back into to our base area and was ready for the next mission.
I found, Dale, there's an interesting historical parallel. You talk about how this was a rubber plantation that supposedly the tire company, Michigan, was supposedly paying off the VC to just keep things cool, and we won't mess, and we get to keep our business going. In Syria, the La Frange cement factory in North Syria, owned by a French company, there are huge lawsuits, as I recall right now, as to whether or not La Frange Cement Company was paying off ISIS to not destroy our cement factory. And so I just thought there's this interesting parallel there. And I believe that case probably isn't settled and is still working its way through courts. But, I mean, it just shows that the dynamics of war and business kind of stay the same, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So you arrive back at CCC. Do you want to walk us through this mission? You got into a really tough gunfight where you got wounded pretty badly.
Donnie took over the job of being the head of the recon people, and then the one who was there before came back to our team, recon team, and he took over the 1-1, so I was 1-2. Ultimately, we went on a mission going overseas. All of a sudden, I forgot in a minute where we were going here. Looking for the enemy, and what we were going to say. I've gone through 5 or 6 of these missions.
The mission where you got hurt pretty badly and had to get.
Yeah, that was only. I thought it was 2 or 3 days, but it was actually 1 day. Within an hour after landing on the ground, the communists were all over the place, and they were surrounding us. They were after us, shooting at us, the whole thing, and we were trying to get out of the way and find a way to escape and so forth. And we were breaking our contact and so forth over and over and over. And finally, we got into a place where we were into a place where there was two or three times we met the enemy, and we fought them one after the other, and fought several. There was one of them that was right on our tail. He come right up to us.
Hopefully we get Dale back here.
That's where we joined.
Sorry, you just skipped the beat there, Dale.
Yeah, we lost you right when you're saying that one was coming up right behind you.
Yeah. Oh, no, I see me moving.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, we bumped into a bunch more people, and we eliminated some of them. But then we bumped into another group, and there were several people who and then we broke contact, moved a little bit farther, and then there was several people who popped up, and there were three of them that jumped up in front of me, and then they were starting to shoot at me. I returned the fire, and I knocked out two of them, and I ran out of my ammunition. They had the AK-47s with 30-round magazine. I had the CAR-15 with only a 20-round magazine. And anyway, we were exchanging fire back and forth. And I, as fast as we could, lots of shells going back and forth. I wiped out the first two, but then I was out of rounds. And then there was one guy left, and he had 10 rounds left. So I'm reaching for the another magazine, and as I'm reaching, the third guy emptied his rifle on me, and he had 10 rounds. So a burst of the shells went through my hand and basically blew off my finger. So one blew off one finger, was hanging by strings of finger, and then blew the ends off of the remaining fingers. And so anyway, I'm reaching for another magazine, and I'm trying hard to get the next magazine in, except the finger is flopping, getting between my hand and the magazine. And finally, I got the new magazine in, and I fired on the people, and another guy stood next to me, and we got the third guy out. And then I had fingers kind of laying everywhere. So the next day I ran over, and he put a bandage around my hand, and my thumb was sticking out and just the tip of my little finger. And we had more firefights, and we broke contact, and we started breaking fire and found a place for our win of the night. We broke contact and got a place. We broke contact from the enemy, found a decent place, and there were 7 of us, and we were wrapped up in a little corner. And I had 4 Claymore mines in front of me for the night, and I laid out the 4 mines. Solid, and I put the 4 triggers for the M79 grenade launchers, and I had them all set up on something solid, and I had my hands on it all night. And the communists started to make their way through us, and the dogs were barking, the tracking dogs and all stuff. I could hear people working their way through the bushes. And I could hear the doors slamming and so forth. So there were lots and lots of people out there. And so anyway, I had my hands on it, and I had one guy to the right of me, and boy, he was pretty nervous. And he kept saying, Hanson, Hanson, VC come. And the guy on the left, same thing, he's VC come. And so we were all ready there, and I had my hands on the plungers, and we were just praying, and it must have been hundreds of them coming up, and we're praying, Lord, plug the noses of these dogs, and I kept praying and praying, and my two guys on my side were awake. But anyway, the communists swept right through us. The dogs never smelled us, and they went right through my position, went right through us,
Wow.
and wound up on the other side. And so we made it through the night. And then the next day, we came out of the place, and we started bumping into more enemy people and so forth. We got into an area, a very, very high-speed trail, and there was a lot of enemy on it. And we saw them coming, and we opened fire on the bunch. And each flank of us, and then there were two high-ranking people that were laying on the ground. They were very tall. They were obviously Chinese. They weren't just North Vietnamese. They were very, very well dressed and so forth. I swept through them, and I wiped out the people on the other end, ran back to the where the people were on the ground. And there was a huge rucksack full of documents, and then a whole bunch of things inside. And we also took all the clothing, we took the shoes, we took the pants, all the clothing and so forth from these people. We undressed them. That they had, and as it turned out, they were on the way to pay off all the agents in two provinces. So we started to get together and make our way out.
Just to clarify, Dale, because I think some folks might have missed it. You killed who was probably a Chinese spy paymaster, and captured his satchel with all of his documents and money, kind of an intelligence treasure trove. And so now you've captured that, and you have to make your way out.
Right. And there were two of them. Enemy lines, and they were both Chinese. And anyway, long and short, we tried to make our way out, and we were at that time definitely trying to get away from the Vietnamese and all stuff. About 2,000 enemy made their way toward us. They were encircling us. They were like we could possibly get out of there. Big time firing. My rifle was fired in half. One of my people had his rifle not work. I gave him my Car 15 because I was slow changing magazines because my hand was messed up. I had knocked out, I killed a couple guys, and one of them had an M2 carbine. And so I used that to replace my Car 15. I went off to one side on a flank where I held off the enemy, and the Covey riders said that I had held off 3 platoons of enemy at that one spot.
Wow.
And so I held them off as long as I could. And it was like it was cutting the grass down. The bullets were so thick that the grass was just being mowed down, and explosions all around the place. Firing was going like crazy. My roommate, the 1-0, was killed. One of my Vietnamese kept it's like he said, I want you to make him come alive again. And I said, we need to get him out of here. So a chopper came in, threw down the rope, and I said, hook him up in the ropes. And then I took the the things that you get with all the money and the lists and all that stuff that were in a folder. I said I put it in his clothes, so we stuck it down his shirt. And you're gone.
No, we have you. D, our producer, he's just stopping the video to see if the audio tracks more smoothly. So we're with you. We're just trying to stop the pauses in your story that are coming from the lag.
Got it. So anyway, the chopper came, dropped down the rope. I had him hook up my roommate into the line, and then two of my people and the intelligence find that we had, and then I sent the choppers out. So they pulled them out, and at that time, I thought I was the only person left. The machine guns that would come down on us and so forth, they were firing on us within, we said 10 meters, but it was person left alive on the ground, and that there was nobody else. So anyway, the other American had the radio, and they were out with that radio. And so I thought I was the only one left on the ground, and I had no way to talk to anyone. So every aircraft in Southeast Asia, and of course I had no idea who to talk, no passwords or anything. So I just yelled into the radio. I says, "Is anybody there?" And the cubby rider. Just so calm. He says, "I got you, Dale. We're covered for you." And so that was all I needed to know on the chop. And then shortly after that, I got shot again, and this time I was shot in the back of the head. And I Hanson, and I ran over, and I couldn't tie the knot because my hand was all messed up. So I did a huge overhand knot and stuck it in the snap link, and then the chopper took off. But instead of clearing the trees before they left the air, drug us through the trees. And so I was dragged through the trees, and looked like it was going to pull a helicopter down. And they were about to cut the lines and drop us behind enemy lines. And at that point, I finally was able to cut the last of the bushes away from and that was the mission. And we had us 5,000 feet. One of the ropes was shot in two by the aircraft, and they were out. The choppers were out of fuel, and so they found the closest place they could go, which was, I think, Ben Head or one of those A camps, and they didn't even have the ability to get higher than 5,000 feet. They just took us straight through a storm, and it was like we had. Like beating us, and we went through that and landed in the A camp, and finally we landed, and that was it. And I was met by Norm Doney, who was the first sergeant, and a couple other people, and that was it. And I think I was intelligence find in the war. And of course, my roommate was killed, and one of my Vietnamese was wounded, and that was it.
And Dale, in addition to this intelligence coup, I'd like to ask you, the title of your book again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I found like there's a bit of a triple entendre there, Born Twice. So I think part of this maybe is that you're referring to, you were a fan of the Ian Fleming James Bond novels, You Only Live Twice, where the villain says, "We only live twice, Mr. Bond." There's maybe a reference to your Christian faith.
Mm-hmm.
And then this mission that you came out of alive. Is that where the title of your book came from?
Yeah, the title of the book had to do with when I became a Christian at age 5, and that's when you're born twice, born again, and I use that as the I thought it was kind of like what you were saying. It kind of fit in with the many times that you just barely survived a mission and so forth. There were many times like they thought you would never live, and of course we did, and of course born twice it meant so much to me, and of course dealing with our CNC guys, the amazing people that were in there.
Hey, Dale, let's try something real quick. If you pull up your Zoom, do you see the just the camera that says stop video? Not the end call, just the stop video.
It's on the left.
Yeah, it's on the left. It's just the cam. Oh. Do you see it's on the left? It's just the camera. Bottom left.
It says David Park.
Oh,
okay, I see where you are.
Yeah, just a little camera icon. Oh.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is.
All right, we may need to cut this a little short because it's skipping so much, and I would be more than happy to have you back again, Dale. But I think we're not necessarily doing justice to your story when it freezes every couple minutes.
Yeah, we feel like we're doing you a disservice in the sense that there are pauses in the story, and it's such an incredible.
And there is much more to talk about. We're probably only halfway through this experience that you wrote about in your book. So if that's okay with you, Dale, I would probably recommend doing that, and we would love to have you back again over the summer.
Sounds great.
Okay, I apologize for it. It's definitely not the ideal situation, but I mean, I would rather come back another time and do it the right way.
Sounds great.
Okay. And folks out there, again, the book is called Born Twice. You want to get ready for, part 2 of this interview. I highly recommend you go to Amazon and check out his book, his memoir. There's a link down in the description to go check it out. And the only other thing I just want to tee up next Friday, I'll let you guys know here in a second who's coming up on the show. Down here next, let's see. Oh, Don Bentley, Apache pilot and author, is going to be on next Friday. And Dale, we'll get you scheduled. It'll probably be July. We'll have you back on, and we'll complete telling the rest of your story about this book and some other fun stuff, interesting stories from your life.
We do have a question. Michelle Ann, thank you very much for your very generous donation. And Michelle Ann says he has children. What do your children think of learning about MACV-SOG and you're being part of such an amazing, crazy part of military history? My dad was lone survivor with Recon Team Alabama with MACV-SOG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the question was,
The question is like, what do your kids think of it, and how did you introduce your kids to your background?
yeah, I don't think I really talked to them that much about it, but over the years, people would call and so forth and talk about it. I don't think very many people realize special forces and the contributions it was, and my people, my family, I think are very good. They're appreciative and they're good, and it's been great with them. I don't know how else to say it. They were just they were blessed. I was blessed by their patience and so forth. I guess that's about it.
Yeah,
You
thanks.
guys.
Well, thank you for joining us, Dale, and we'll get things hashed out, and we'll do this again. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of your story, and thank you for your patience.
Yeah, we deeply appreciate your time. We deeply appreciate you and your service, and we just want a time where you can tell your story and there are no technical difficulties.
Yeah, there was a lot of problems. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it's Alaska connections, and things just weren't coming through.
We'll work it out.
This part's coming through.
And again, folks, go check out Born Twice. You can by Dale Hanson. You can find it on Amazon, wherever you guys go for books. I highly recommend it. Recommend the book. I just finished reading it this week. So go check it out, and you'll be ready for part 2.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, Dale.
Have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you next
Thank you.